This is the Jimmy Doane Show. I am Counselor Curtis. I'm here live with Jimmy Doane.
And I'm Jimmy Doane here at our normal 4 o'clock time on Sunday.
That's right.
Also, we're on Wednesdays at 4 o'clock.
That's right.
And just usually try and be on for an hour and got news to say.
Yes, we do. So,
I
unfortunately,
meant to tell you it's August 12th.
yes,
That's
12th of August, and unfortunately today,
no video.
No video.
Once again.
Yeah, and if there's any problem with the audio on this track, I will upload a new copy within an hour or so of the end of the show. So, if it's giving us a problem, we're still on a weird computer here.
Don't say it's weird. It's attacking time.
Well, it's not the studio computer. Is what I'm saying. So,
All right.
So anyway, so what is happening today?
Well, we got a fair amount of news today.
Okay.
Most of it's international, so maybe some people are going to tune out, but it does affect us to some extent.
Of course.
The first thing is that came up with is that for the first time in more than a year, Iran test-fired a ballistic missile in a, as it says here, in a brazen display of defiance months after President Trump pulled the United States out of a landmark nuclear deal and days before his administration slapped new sanctions on the Islamic Republic. 3 U.S. officials acknowledge of the launch. That's what they understand. So, of course, he pulls out of the thing, and basically that gives Iran full clear. As long as you're not going to do it, we'll just do our thing.
Right.
And apparently it only went like 100 miles, but still, it was a short-range ballistic missile.
Yeah.
And
100 miles doesn't get them. There's nothing but sand within 100 miles.
Well, it was one of those things. It was from their land to their land. Apparently, over some river, It coincided with a large-scale naval exercise by Iran's Revolutionary Guard forces late last week, involving over 50 small gunboats, which we've seen those before. That kind of is pretty much like shooting fish in a barrel when those gunboats come out and threaten our ships.
Yeah, well.
And so anyway, they were rehearsing swarm tactics, which one day potentially could shut down the vital waterway through which 30% of the world's oil pass each year, which would be rather significant. That brings up another thing that we might talk about later about the Canada thing. So anyway, the missile test from Bandlahar, whatever, in Jask in the southeastern Iran has not been previously reported. The launch was distracted by our satellites. According to officials, the anti-ship Fatah 110, whatever it is, flew 100 miles on a flight path over the Strait of Hormuz to a test range in the Iranian desert, shore to shore, so to speak. So apparently what these guys have decided to do, and I'm sure that the Trump administration and everybody, decried this as another, who knows what, red line, something.
I don't know. He's not fond of drawing red lines, he says.
He's not.
And they shouldn't. Look, this is why we thought the Iran deal, or Iran or whatever, was a good deal, because putting them off for 10 years out of test stuff like this, 10 years in today's technology, that's a huge amount of time.
It's huge.
But 100 miles.
We'll have time travel by then.
Yeah, exactly. So you hold him off for 10 years. So he pulled out, and now we face the repercussions, which is they're moving forward. 100 miles, as they say, doesn't get him anything. 500 miles.
Well, it wasn't. It was a short-range ballistic missile, which means it goes up high.
Yeah.
So it certainly could go, if it was timed right, it certainly could go a lot further than 100 miles.
Well, that's what I was getting at. Is I wonder. It doesn't seem to me. I would imagine that the leap from 100 to 500 miles is not a huge technological leap.
Nothing to it. No, it's a ballistic missile. It goes into the upper atmosphere.
Right.
At supersonic speeds. I mean. You can't hardly hold that down. I mean,
no.
The only way you'd have it go only 100 miles would be to not fuel it.
Well, I mean, it could be the size. I mean, it could be the whole, it just doesn't have the capacity to go that far.
Well, of course, the thing is, but it does appear that when you're testing something like this, it could take out a carrier.
Totally could take out a carrier.
Yeah.
In the strait there.
Right.
Yeah, and Yeah, I mean, I think the big ships are becoming very vulnerable and maybe obsolete pretty soon.
I've said that for a long time. I mean, when you realize now the way the submarines are going, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, subs, they're like dead silent. I'm sorry, you don't know that they're there, and
Right.
they can fire from 200 feet down,
Right.
and all this AI international GPS coordinates from the satellites and everything.
Mm-hmm.
You can go anywhere.
Well, yeah, and so we'll see how that escalates. But if they get to 500 miles, they can reach Israel and Riyadh.
Well, the other thing is when you realize even the North Koreans can go 500 miles, so certainly the Iranians are certainly not. They're not behind them, I wouldn't think.
Well, yeah, like we said, if you're at 100 miles, you're knocking at the door.
No.
So
right.
it'll be interesting to see. Well, it's a good thing then that the new Space Force is coming online.
Space Force.
Heck yeah!
I mean, that's all we need is another division of people that have decided to go into the Space Force as opposed to like the Marines or the Air Force. Or
right.
Thinking, what?
Well, look, it's just going to be a subsection of the Air Force, obviously. I mean, it's the high altitude Air Force, basically. So,
I guess, but still, Space Space Force is
outer space.
Well, what they said was this. They're not. This was the part that's a little bit alarming. They have bragged that they want the United States to take control of the military applications in outer space.
Oh yeah, well we do that all the time.
Well, I mean, but you're not supposed to.
Yeah, see, we have this double standard where we're allowed to assert our dominance over other cultures, but they're not allowed to even hint that they are out from under our.
Yeah, we have we have like 180 bases in I don't know how many countries, and other countries have got like one base in their own country. So it's
that's right.
It's kind of. What's interesting also. Remember now, even though, and this is the last thing I want to say on this, was even though that Trump has reduced this, has ramped up the sanctions, and said we're pulling out of the Iran deal. The other countries are still saying, "Whoa, wait a minute! We're gonna buy their oil. We're gonna do whatever it is." So,
well, and as well they should. As we've talked about before, the solution is to trade, get the people over there dependent on our trade, such that they wouldn't allow the government to.
Well, of course, what our administration has said is, if you, France, for instance, trade with Iran, we're going to ramp up our trade against
sanctions
you.
Against
sanctions
you. Yeah,
against
President Trump seems to be just big on trade wars. That seems to be one of his cool toys.
What's interesting is I was reading a bunch of the statistics, and it turns out, for what it's worth, the other countries are suffering bad.
Well, right. What we talked about, we figured.
I mean, they are. I mean, Russia, Turkey, who else have they gone against?
Iran.
Iran, yeah. I mean, these countries are, they're basically starving to death practically because, I mean, the Turkey, well, we're going to talk about that in a minute, but I mean, that's the lira, that's what they use down there, has dropped to nothing practically.
Well, all we can hope is that Trump's trade wars are exactly what he says, which is he's going to put the pressure on them to drop their barriers, and then we would drop ours as well. I'm not holding my breath.
No, I mean, because one of the things that the guy, and we're going to talk about this in a minute, is that sanctions are an act of war, pure and simple, and they really never worked. But anyway, let's go. Let me move on to the next item here.
Okay.
This is Quito, Ecuador.
Right.
Declared a state of emergency after 30,000 migrants escaping violence and collapsing economy in the first week of August. Can you imagine? This is coming out all of Venezuela.
30,000 migrants in a week.
In a week.
4,500 people a day.
Yeah, 4,500 people a day.
That's a lot of people.
I mean, really, you talk about an invasion. Can you imagine what would happen if 4,500 people immigrated to this country every day?
Right.
I mean, you got to be kidding me. It would. I mean, we're talking about the what's happening down on the Mexican border, for instance, is what? I don't know, 100 a day or something.
Yeah. I was going to look up the numbers to compare them, but it's a fraction, obviously, a tiny fraction of 4,500 a day.
Well, not only it says here, it says that more than 500,000 Venezuelans have crossed into Ecuador this year as part of one of the largest mass migrations in Latin American history.
Everybody with a freaking wallet is getting out of Venezuela as fast as possible.
Can you imagine a half of? I mean, now I don't know how big. I didn't look up how big Ecuador is, but ain't that big.
Well, I'm with you. It's
500,000. This country in 1 year would be, I think, hard pressed to absorb 500,000 people, and we got 320 million.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, if I had to guess, I would say Ecuador maybe 100,000 square miles. I mean, it's not it's not that big.
Well, not only that, and not that populous, and not that rich.
Right. You wonder. I mean, the labor market. Oh man.
Can you imagine the price of labor must be? You would think. I mean, you don't know what the government's going to do about it, but it's going to drop to a penny a day for bricklayers.
Right.
So,
right. As long as they don't pay them in strong bolivars.
Right. Right. Exactly. Well, of course, that's
they're getting.
I don't know what the Ecuadorian money is, but it's.
Man, I bet it's dollars.
It could very well be. I think it is one of the countries that is pegged to the dollar.
Right.
It could be. So anyway, what's interesting about this is nearly 10 times the number of migrants and refugees who attempted to cross the Mediterranean over the same period. I mean, that's amazing. There have been 50,000 that have tried to cross the Mediterranean, very treacherous, to get into Europe, and 500,000 that have basically walked across the border.
Right. And that's just Ecuador.
Right.
I mean, once you factor in Colombia and Brazil,
right.
There must be an incredible brain drain happening right now. Because it's the smart people, the educated ones, people who can go get a job in one of those other countries.
Right.
I would imagine. I would imagine that the mobile people would be the first ones to go.
Well, also, those people have got nothing to lose.
Right. Well, that's true too. That's the opposite group. And they have said that if you're rich in Venezuela right now, things are pretty awesome because you can get super cheap gourmet meals and places to stay. If you've got the dollars.
Where does the food come from?
Well, if you've got the dollars, then they'll bring the food in.
Yeah.
But
room service, please.
Yeah.
Country service.
Country service.
Yeah, I don't know.
Drone food delivery can't be far off.
No, it can't. All right, another international, and this dovetails onto something we talked about a minute ago. In Istanbul, President, whatever his name is, Erdogan, hit back Saturday at U.S. threats over a detained American pastor, which has escalated tensions between the two NATO allies and piled pressure on the Turkish currency. Now, a couple of things here. What's interesting to me, first of all, Erdogan says the following: "I'm calling on those in America again. Shame on you. Shame on you. You are exchanging your strategic partner in NATO for a priest." Well, okay, strategic partner. I mean, I don't know how much of a partner these guys are anymore, and I don't know why they're in NATO. I mean, they're starting to do business, and they're on the Russian border. I mean,
that's why they're in NATO. That's exactly why. It's because
But they're starting to trade with Russia and everything.
Well, there are those of us in this country that applaud that, think that's just fine. Turkey has a history of it's all over the place.
Yeah.
And at
times
it's
really almost 2 or 3 countries when you consider the West and the East are tough. So I mean, Istanbul or whatever is a multicultural city if there ever was one.
Well, exactly. And there were times in history when that area was the freest, most educated, most wealthy, and that's why I think. I mean, it's a real country. I think that it should be.
Well, that's right on the eastern tip. Of the, what is it, the Bosporus or whatever, what's that strait? I forget, whatever, that comes down through whatever it is. But the point is that it's a far cry from what's in Western Turkey. Which borders up on Syria and everything like that. I mean, it's just totally different kind of people.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and then in the south they've got the Kurds, and like you said, it's multicultural. I mean, from my perspective, I don't think we need NATO anyway, as we've talked about in the past.
I mean, this is right. With friends like this, who needs enemies? I mean, of course, what's happening is I'm not exactly sure who's doing what, but their money has plummeted 16% on Friday.
Yeah.
2 days ago, and it says it's one of these spats that, as far as I'm concerned, should never have happened in the first place. I mean, they're no real friend of ours. the guy's a total dictator.
Yeah, I mean, it hasn't worked out exactly the way they wanted to.
They have been extending their emergency. First it was
Right,
3
right.
months, then it was 6 months, then it's a year, and now he's president for life. I mean,
And he imprisoned all those opposition people and everything.
Right. And so this is all over, as he said. And I will say this: it's all okay. It's all over a priest. Why would you bother to bring the full weight of the United States
Exactly.
for a priest?
Give the priest back.
Yeah, right. This is not anything to fight over. This is like a little flea thing that you're fighting over. It doesn't make any sense.
I'm with you. I think they're making a huge mistake. We'll see.
Well, what's interesting is that Erdogan has urged the Turks this is great, not to be panicked by the currency crisis, saying if they have the dollar, we have Allah.
Yeah.
So we have God.
Yeah. So,
and they've got the dollar. Well,
so eat
I don't know
that.
about you, but
and then what about he said about if you've got gold or savings?
No, I was getting to that. He also advised them to show solidarity by converting any stashed away gold or foreign currency to Turkish lira in a bid to wage war of independence against America. Are you kidding me?
Hey, that's all in. All in. Everybody in. Take all your life savings.
That's right.
And put them in this currency that dropped 15% on Friday.
Right. That's right. and well, of course, it
what could possibly go wrong?
Well, this is one of the things that happened in this country. In March of 1933.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Roosevelt issues an executive order.
Mm-hmm.
Turn in your gold.
Yep.
And a lot of people did.
Sure.
And the stupidest thing on the planet. I mean, fortunately,
It was illegal not to.
Yeah, but so what? Is what a lot of people said. Well, there was an exception, and that was for jewelry and numismatic items. Well, suddenly all coins became numismatic, and of course they are today.
Right.
So that's just fine. Okay, another international item. This is very interesting to me. Let me just see here. Yeah, this is the other international. This is part which should come as a light note.
Okay.
Intelligent crows to pick up litter at French theme park.
Oh yeah, this is awesome.
This is unbelievable. 6 crows specifically have been trained to pick up cigarette butt ends and rubbish and will be put to work next week at a French historical theme park. The goal is not just to clear up, because visitors are generally careful to keep things clean, but also show that nature itself can teach itself to take care of itself and so forth. Rooks, a member of the crow family of birds that also includes the carrion crow, the jackdaw, and raven, are considered to be particularly intelligent, and the right circumstances like to communicate with humans, and establish a relationship through play. Well, what's interesting is you only have to go on YouTube to see how crows, figure stuff out.
It's amazing.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to set up 4 traps in order to get the food, and they're through this in no time.
Right.
And they compared them with dogs, for instance, who just give up on the first trap, and dogs are smart, but these crows, boy, they are. So the birds will be encouraged to spruce up the park through the use of a small box that delivers a tasty nugget of bird food each time the rook deposits a cigarette or small piece of rubbish. To me, that's fantastic.
It is.
Crows are smart, but when you look around and you see, for instance, the crows or rooks or whatever they are that are in Queen Elizabeth's out there near the Tower of London, they have some crows that regularly habit that area. I think they're larger than our normal domestic crows, not domestic, but our local crows here.
Okay.
I think they're about twice the size. I could be wrong, and I don't know if they clip their wings or not. But anyway, they're famous crows anyway at the Tower of London. Okay.
What do they clean up?
Yeah, they poop a lot. Like ducks don't clean up anything.
Yeah.
Okay, now we've got a couple of local things.
Okay.
This is top news. Let's see here. And then at the end I'll have one more international one. Well, let me get to the international thing now. Russia's Prime Minister sternly warned the United States on Friday against ramping up sanctions, saying that Moscow will retaliate with economic, political, and other specified other means, quote unquote. U.S. sanctions are already sent the Russian ruble tumbling to its lowest level in 2 years. And the reason for this is that this guy, this Russian guy, and his daughter or something were poisoned in London with some nerve agent. Now they recovered, but this is for retaliation against this poisoning, and it's interesting to me that this is almost like the priest thing. Okay, look, somebody, we don't know who for sure, but we're guessing it's the Russians, poisoned these two people, but they got better, and so now we're going to do, the entire power of the United States is going to do sanctions on Russia. I mean, this is an act of war.
Well, it sounds like an excuse to do the sanctions. Look, if we were to believe the mainstream media, then clearly this is all just a show to cover up the extremely kind relationship between President Putin and President Trump.
Oh, that's true too. Yeah,
this is all just a ruse, so that they can say that they're fighting.
That's right, and that way you can't say anymore that Trump is Putin's puppet.
That's right. That's right.
That's right.
So, but in reality, I think it's way overkill.
It's total overkill. I mean, they and of course they do it as they always do. It's for national security implications.
Well, that's just
everything is national security.
They just throw that out there. It's like WMD. You know, you have to.
No, it's like I feared for my life.
Right.
You know, when the cops or whoever it is, you know, I took him out because I feared for my life. He was running away, yes, but I still feared for my life. There was a dog in the backyard.
Really
and I feared
scared
for my
at
life.
that point.
Yeah. So anyway, Medvedev, or whatever his name is, warned the U.S. that such a move would, and here we are, cross a red line. Now I thought this was interesting.
Red line.
Since we call them the Reds,
Uh-huh.
anyway, and we'll cross a red line. If something like a ban on bank operations or currency use follows, it will amount to a declaration of economic war and will warrant a response with economic means, political means, and if necessary, other means. And then he also goes on to say, our American friends should understand that. Well, yeah, okay. Friends, I don't know. So let's see. The next item is now we're going to go local.
Okay.
And this is a couple of things here. One of the things I do want to hear about from you is game publishers tend not to be fans of used game sales if it cuts them out of any profits from the sale. In a confusing legal move, Bethesda Softworks took action against someone reselling an unopened game it published, which could set a bad legal precedent. Amazon Marketplace seller Ryan Hupp has had a sealed copy of Evil Within 2 for sale on the site when he received a cease and desist letter from a law firm representing Bethesda, according to reports. The letter states Hupp was not authorized reseller and could not legally sell a new copy as described in his listing. And the reason was that as a new copy have a warranty for 30 or 60 days from the time of purchase. And as far as they're concerned, if it was sold without a warranty, then it wasn't new. Well, what I find interesting about this is I just don't see how you can say anything. I mean, why would they sue this guy for selling his own property? I mean, he bought it, and now it's his. And now the software people are saying, well, no, you can't resell it.
Well, what they're trying to do is stop him and other people like him from cutting into their profits by selling other copies of the new product. That is to say, let's say somebody bought half of their inventory brand new,
Yeah.
left it wrapped up, and then decided to dump it on the market.
Yeah. But they got their money.
No, I'm with you. I'm not arguing that they shouldn't be able to do it. I'm saying that's their motivation is.
Yeah.
They're trying to preserve their own the value of their product. But I'm with you. I mean, once you buy it, as far as I'm concerned, it's yours. You own it, and you can resell it. I don't like the rule that says you can't resell stuff.
I tell you that. Well, this in the article they did say this was a bit of a stretch, and it doesn't appear that it's going to hold up. But like you say, they already got their money.
Right.
For this, I mean, they got their money. So
yeah, they're arguing over the word "new."
Right.
So, I mean, I'm with you. As far as I'm concerned, you buy it, you own it. You can not only give it away. You can smash it to a million pieces.
Right.
You can do whatever you want to do with it because it's yours.
That's right.
But-
I agree. The title has passed,
That's it.
and unless there's something on the back of this that says we still own it,
Right.
well.
And I'm not a fan of that.
Okay. The next item. This is also kind of interesting. We've got two more things here. Leslie McSpadden, the mother of Michael Brown. You remember Michael Brown?
Sure. Hands up, don't shoot.
Hands up. Well, yeah, right. Officially announced her campaign for Ferguson City Council just a day after the 4-year anniversary of her son's death. Amid chants of "Run, Leslie, run," whatever, McSpadden revealed she was going to be running in 2019. 3 of my major things I will focus on when elected, because I'm speaking into existence, whatever that is community policing, economic equality, and access to health care for all of Ferguson's young children and everyday people. Well,
Woohoo!
yeah. Well, this reminds me of a little bit of when somebody gets a little bit of fame.
Mm-hmm.
The next thing you want to know, they're going to run for office because they've got the name recognition. I remember years ago, this is one of those things that happened here in Florida, and I forget what her name was now. That shows you what it means. This was in the 2000 election, was Gore versus Bush or whatever, when it went to the Supreme Court. Well, our Secretary of State, this is a job that it means nothing. I mean, I forget what her name was, but Patricia something or
Catherine,
yes. Right, Catherine something. Anyway, she was the center of attention for a couple of days. And everybody noticed that suddenly she had new makeup, new hairdo. She's out and she's talking about all this stuff. She was the one that's supposed to. It's an automatic thing here in Florida that after a certain number of days, you certify the results. End of story. A robot could do this.
Right.
I mean, just nothing. But boy, she took it to the end. I mean, and was interviewing and was in front of the cameras and the microphones and had to give a speech every day practically. And she was going to try and lead that into a public something, or a position in Congress or someplace. But I mean, this is funny about this mother of Michael Brown. I mean, you got to ask yourself what she qualified for. I don't know.
Well, from my perspective, look, she's running for city council. It's not like she's running for Congress or anything.
That's true.
I say more power to her. She's motivated to get in there and do something.
Yeah.
And look, policing, she may be able to bridge a divide between the local police and the kids in the area, the groups around there. She may have. She's obviously got street cred at this point.
Yeah.
So
That's true.
if she's to show up at certain places and I think if she were to get in at this point and then learn about how things really happen in the police force, there could be some common ground in there and a little bit of hope for the Ferguson area. So,
as I've always said, hope is not a business plan.
well, maybe it's a political plan, though.
Yeah, right. It's fake. Well, it is interesting that she's going to try and parlay this, and well, we'll see what happens. I mean, let me put it this way: whatever she is, when I look around at our local people, for instance, what could be worse?
Hey, like I say, let her go. See what happens.
Okay, now here's the last thing I've got besides an article that I want to talk about global warming.
Okay.
As it were. Whether by brazenly injecting sex in the public sphere, adopting gay subculture for mainstream audiences, or becoming the top female selling art musician of all time, Madonna has asserted an incalculable influence. And one of the reasons this is important today is because in 4 days, she's going to be 60.
Oh, cool.
And she is still wowing.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, she's also on a kind of a scale. Another one that wows them that's kind of in that age is Tina Turner.
Mm-hmm.
As her legs are still insured for millions of dollars.
Mm-hmm.
But what's interesting is the pop star is turning 60 and again breaking barriers. This time as a mature woman who is still brash, carnal, and unapologetic, giving new meaning to the term sexagenarian.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that is, when you think 60, for God's sake, she's still dating guys half her age.
Well, she's got $1 billion.
Yeah, no, right. She's got, and so her latest tour, she's on tour for God's sakes, and she's, with characteristically provocative show that simulated most conceivable sex acts, which some may be inconceivable to the some
Yeah,
people,
yeah.
but I don't know. Even as a mother, Madonna has pursued her relationships. The attention stands in contrast to the comparative societal yawn over older men who date much younger women with still active stars. Get ready to this: Mick Jagger, who's 76 or something,
Mm-hmm.
and Billy Joel, who both recently became fathers.
Sure.
76 years old.
Woohoo!
No, I mean that's all well and good, but what I'm thinking is that, I mean, you're going to be 96 before your kid's going to just starting to go into college.
Yeah, but they've got, again, $1 billion each. They can set up whatever they want.
Well, they're going
And
to
they've got older siblings and such to
Yeah.
watch after them.
all right.
So,
It's just interesting because as the kid grows up,
mm-hmm.
And he gets into his teen years, and my father
The
was
father-daughter dance and...
well, not only that,
Uh-huh.
the father-daughter dance, that's one,
Uh-huh.
and the wheelchair samba, whatever it is. But the point is that the kid goes in, he's 12 or 13 years old, and he talks to his classmates, says, "My dad's Mick Jagger," and they go, "Who?"
Yeah! Well, we'll see.
It's the Rolling Stones. Who?
The what?
What? Can you imagine?
Well,
This is,
yeah.
I mean, you sit there and think, it's just stunning to me. You go in and my dad's Billy Joel. Who? Shit. Okay, that's interesting. All right, well, that is pretty much all the stuff I've got for
That's all
local
you
news.
got there?
How about you?
I think there were a couple of things I saw here. Well, you said you want to talk about that global warming article.
Okay, this actually is quite extensive.
Okay.
And I cut this out because I've talked about this kind of thing before.
Yeah.
The headline is Planet X.
We got to get your buddy, who is the climatologist person, to come on the show and
Oh, yeah, right.
give us the counter side.
Yeah, right. Well, he's already written a book on it.
Well, but I want to ask him questions. I got questions.
Well, I tried to, at the class reunion.
Oh, okay.
I tried to ask him questions about this stuff. And I asked actually 3 of my classmates who all said, they looked at me like I was a nutcase.
Yeah, well, you have the super...
Well, I said, if it hadn't happened by now, it's probably, what we were told. Now let me just think now. This was in 2000, was it 2012 or 2002? Must have been 2000 and, no, I can't remember what, anyway, might have been 2010, no, couldn't have been, whatever it was, doesn't really matter. It was after I'd had my lung transplant, but very shortly thereafter. Anyway, I went up to this reunion, and I had 3 of my classmates that had all attended Ivy League schools, and they'd been indoctrinated, and as far as they were concerned, global warming was absolutely true. How can you go, against 96% of the scientific, so forth and so on? And I said, but I said, you do understand that 10 or 15 years ago, they told us that if we didn't do it by 5 years ago or 8 years ago, we're doomed. So where are these scientists all moving to the mountains? I mean, what's going on here? I mean, they have told us
They're already in the underground bunker.
I guess I'm sitting there thinking that, and so here's another one that comes up and says we only have 10 to 20 years to fix this. And when we had 10 to 20 years ago.
The first thing I think of is, in 10 to 20 years, we may have the singularity.
Right.
And we may have AI capable of fixing this in a week.
Yeah.
At that point. So, but, okay, 10 to 20 years in today's technology. So what else does it say?
Well, this summer, people have been suffering and dying because of heat waves and wildfires in many parts of the world. The past 3 years were the warmest ever recorded, and 2018 is likely to follow suit. What we do in the next 10 to 20 years will determine whether our planet remains hospitable to human life or slides down to an irreversible path to what scientists in a major new study call hothouse Earth conditions. Well, the point is that if you think that humans are going to survive anyway, I mean, without, somehow the idea is that 10,000 years from now there's going to be humans on this planet, which Probably not.
Well, but that doesn't mean we give up. I mean, if
No, but I'm saying that is the way I look at it is that, and it goes on to talk about this stuff here. They need to, they're talking about the way they try and fix this. Cutting carbon emissions to a limit climate change to 2 degrees centigrade, as proposed by the Paris Agreement, won't be enough to avoid hothouse Earth. Here's what they're talking about. They're talking about the feedback situations that cause, once one of these things starts, it causes it to start to
sure, and it just spins out of control.
Right. Permafrost thaw is one of the 10 feedbacks that's studied in the paper. It released permafrost melting, or whatever you want to call it, would release huge amounts of carbon dioxide and methane. Of course, methane apparently is a lot more deadly to the atmosphere than carbon.
Yeah.
These tipping points can potentially act like a row of dominoes. Once one is pushed over, it pushes Earth towards another, said this guy. It's near impossible to stop once it starts, and the next thing you know, we're on a path to hothouse Earth. Well, the point is, the other thing that we're going to look at here in just a second is that the idea that you're going to get 7.5 billion people to coordinate their lives to cut, to do whatever's necessary is a joke. It's just not going to happen. There's too many people that A, don't believe it, don't care.
Well, that's what it comes down to. I think if there were proof, if it were something like an approaching asteroid,
right,
that you could see and show, look, if we don't do something, we need everybody to go outside of here and push on the Earth from wherever you are or something, then I think people would do it.
The little minor problem, of course, is if everybody pushed on the Earth at the same time, it wouldn't go anywhere.
Don't kill the goal here. So I obviously, I mean, from my perspective, their problem is one of convincing people still. As you said, there have been far too many predictions that have not come to fruition. I noticed, incidentally, in the article that they talk about the baseline for the temperature. Mm-hmm. They talk about a baseline was established that measured the temperature between 1960 and 1990, or 1970, 1990. And then I noticed a few years ago they altered the baseline.
Let's do that.
Yes, well they
move the goalposts.
And so my guess is the new baseline is obviously more accurate, right?
Okay.
Which of course implies that the old baseline was inaccurate.
Right.
So any possibility that we're going to change the baseline in the future?
Sure. Well, not only that, in 1970,
mm-hmm.
if you get a Time magazine from 1970,
mm-hmm.
it's talking about the big freeze.
Well, okay, and I've heard that before, but I've also heard that was just that magazine.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know. I mean, I think if you look back at the history, I mean, anybody can Google Earth history, Earth temperature. And if we believe all those readings, and I'll get into that in just a second, but if we assume that all those temperature models are correct that come up on Google Images when you Google Earth temperature history, what you see is the overwhelming pattern is controlled by the Milankovitch cycles right now, which...
Who's Milankovitch?
It's some guy who discovered this cycle in the global temperature, whereby for 80,000 or for 20,000 years the Earth warms, and then for 80,000 years it cools. And this cycle has repeated 10 times over the last million years.
Wow.
The temperature differential in the change is on the order of 5 degrees centigrade.
Okay.
That's it. Okay, so it goes up a few degrees and then down a few degrees, and it does this over and over again. If we just look at that cycle, we should continue warming for another 2,000 years. But the warming will only be about 1 degree or 2 degrees from here, which is a lot in terms of the kinetic energy of the globe,
mm-hmm.
but it's nothing that is going to create a catastrophic hot Earth scenario. We'll see. Now, of course, what they're saying is now, oh yeah, things are heating up much faster than they were before.
Right.
If you look at the article again, it says we're up 1.1 degree from 1880. From the 1880 to 1900 baseline that they established.
Right.
So 100 years and 1 degree. So that would be a lot more change than previously seen if that trend continues. Well, we'll see if it continues. They also talk about in the article El Nino and La Nina as having significant warming effects and cooling effects, respectively. And we had a particularly strong El Ninos in those years, in the last few years, and particularly weak La Ninas. So now, are those correlations or causations?
Right.
I don't know.
No.
But so we'll see. I mean, from my perspective, I still go back to how accurate were the measurements back in 1880, and how accurate are our measurements of the global temperature from 1,000 years ago.
Well, they do a lot of that off the ice cores.
I know. And how accurate are the ice cores? What's the margin of error in an ice core? And I can't, it's very difficult to me to believe that we can take an ice core and calculate the temperature to within or less than 1/10 of 1 degree.
Yeah.
Going back 10,000, 100,000, a million years. And then I think about location of the temperature. That is to say, obviously today we have thermometers everywhere, and we could take a nice measurement and average it out pretty well. Well, if you're going to go back and measure the temperature of the Earth 100,000 years ago using ice cores, there's not many places you can go. You have to go to places where there's ice. And so it would seem like the field of measurements that you would accumulate, just the field in and of itself, would have a tendency to alter the reading. That is, if we took all the temperature readings in North America one year, and then the next year we took all the readings in Asia, are those really going to be compatible to within 1/10 of 1 degree? That's the kind of question that I want to ask a climate scientist. What is the margin of error for our ancient measurement techniques? And what is the statistical variation caused by the variation in measuring points? And until I get answers to those questions, I'm reluctant to believe the speed with which they're saying.
There's a couple of things you got to be careful about, though, because you talk about these guys, the climatologists or whatever, that have been studying this stuff for 30 years.
I know.
And of course, it reminds me a little bit of like a doctor. You go to a doctor and they say, "Well, here's what's wrong with you."
Right.
And you say, "Well, can you explain that to me?"
Right.
And so they come up with this jargon, blah 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 blah, and you're sitting there, that doesn't tell me anything.
I fully agree.
You just have to trust me.
Right. Well, sure. Yeah. Exactly. And look, to some extent, we do that. To some extent, we rely on the experts. But when you're talking about something that's so consequential that you're asking for huge economic changes.
Oh, not only that. What if you're wrong?
Well,
I mean, you're basically going to change the life. You're going to experiment and change the lives of every human on Earth. With an experiment.
Well, we would call it an experiment. I think that they would call it a fix if they believe that their science is perfectly accurate.
Yeah. Okay. See, now here's another example. We're sitting here right now looking at the blooms in the off of South Florida, and it's because they've tried to fix Okeechobee and fix the geniuses down there, the Corps of Engineers and everything have diverted stuff around and all that, and suddenly we've got these algae blooms stink everything you want to happen.
Well, see, that's the beauty of the great global warming theory push, which is the entire thing comes down to one atom, carbon.
Yeah.
That's it. As far as they're concerned, the entire temperature is controlled by this one lever. And to me, that actually speaks to the concept that we will find other solutions to the situation.
Well, they talk about that.
If all we got to do is get carbon, all we got to do is create a life form that eats carbon. I don't know.
We have
algae.
Yeah, right. Algae, right. Yeah,
they're everywhere. And look, as we've talked about in the past, the natural variation in carbon that is released into the atmosphere on an annual basis is orders of magnitude greater than the entire human contribution. Okay? The natural variation is greater than the entire human contribution. So even if we eliminated our entire contribution, we would still have a variation in carbon input naturally that is orders of magnitude.
Well, not only that, you have, as you well know, from time to time, every million years or so, we've got an inordinate something or another that blows up and puts all kinds of crazy stuff in that you could never foresee one way or the other.
Well, there are some. It would take a cataclysmic natural event to do something like that. I mean, just a regular volcano doesn't produce as much carbon as we produce in a day or something.
Okay.
But still, I mean, you're right. It's certainly possible.
Well, anyway, these people, just let me go on here. They said we need to be, whoever we are, need to become responsible planetary stewards in the next 10 years. This is the biggest global security issue of all time. Well, yeah, I mean, I'm wondering about. They're talking about the feedback and everything. The good news is that we know what to do to avoid.
Sure.
And we
just
have,
give us
we
a
have
bunch
the
of
knowledge
money
and ability to act. This is within our control.
Mm-hmm.
You know, who are you anyway? Go ahead.
Well,
the top priority in the coming decade is to aggressively cut carbon emissions and decarbonize our energy systems as quickly as possible. So, and how are you going to do this?
Sanctions and fines.
This is starting to happen now because alternative energy such as wind and solar are now cheaper than fossil energy. Now, one of the things that people don't understand is that wind and solar and the electric cars and everything also emit vast amounts of carbon because of the energy needed to create that stuff.
Right, and there's no way that last sentence is accurate, which is that alternative forms of energy are cheaper than our carbon-based forms now.
No, and the reason is pretty obvious. If it was, it would be done.
That's what I'm saying.
The market figures this out.
Well, exactly.
I mean, on its face, the market. I mean, look, why did the automobile in 20 years take over the horse and buggy? I mean,
because it was better.
It was way better. And, I mean, people that had. What I laugh, of course, is that people that were out on a farm and had one horse. When you get a Model T, you had 25 horses in the engine.
Right.
I mean, boom.
Yeah.
And all you had to do is feed them a little gas or whatever. So anyway, the third priority is the second priority is to halt deforestation and conversion of natural areas into agriculture and production. So you got to stop agriculture production.
Right.
And so
hey, look, you think about that for just 1 second. Their purpose here is to help mankind, ostensibly, right? And so the way they're going to do that is stop agricultural production, which feeds mankind.
Right.
There are people starving all over the place, and
well, anybody has figured it out that we actually produce enough food to feed the whole planet. It's just getting there.
Right.
As Sam Kinison used to say, when they were starving in Africa. Why are you moving
in the desert?
Why are you moving the food over there? Move them back.
Bring them where the food is.
So, and then the third priority is to continue to develop technologies to pull carbon from the atmosphere and safely store it for thousands of years. So, of course, then what happens in thousands of years? See, what gets me, of course, is people don't seem to worry about what happens in thousands of years, but I personally don't care what happens in 100 years.
Well, and look, to even be concerned about what's going to happen in more than 100 years assumes that you have any concept of how things are going to change in 100 years.
You don't have a concept of what's going to change in 20 years.
Well, that's what I'm getting at. The technology, it's going to be so...
You can't imagine, when you think about it, just a second, it was 11 years ago that somebody came up with the iPhone. It is now so ubiquitous. In 11 years has changed almost everything on this planet for people. I mean, it's stunning.
Well, and like you said, you go back 100 years, and it's literally horse-drawn buggies.
Right.
Literally horse-drawn buggies, no airplanes,
no air conditioning.
Yeah.
No penicillin.
Nah.
No, and life expectancy low, whatever, and on and on. Well, that's right. And of course, it reminds me of what I tell people all the time. When I was in the hospital. 4 years, 5 years, or whatever it was. Let's see, 5 years now. Yeah, 5 years ago, getting my new lungs. I would ask they would come in and they had an iPad. It was Wi-Fi connected to the whole hospital computer system, and they would come in and tap this iPad or whatever it is before they give me the medicines or do what they did. And I asked them, what do you think about it? And they said, well, yeah, it's fine. I said, well, let me ask you a question. How long have you been working here? I've been working here 20 years. Okay, let me ask you a question. 20 years ago, 15 years ago, when you came here, could you have possibly foreseen the way things are today? And they would think in a minute, and they'd say, no way, no chance, no, never would have guessed. This would have been like, outer space, alien technology. We are using, basically, compared to 15 years ago, alien technology.
Yeah.
And if you don't think that alien technology is going to be here in 15 to 20 years, you just don't know. You don't understand. You don't know history to know.
Well, all you have to know is that technology it grows exponentially. It compounds on itself.
Well, that's why Ray Kurzweil talked about the singularity.
Mm-hmm.
And how what's his name at Intel came up with the computing power doubles every 18 months or whatever it is, and when you take that to its logical extreme, and it's been happening for 50 or 60 years.
Yeah, and there are some people who actually take it back before the computer revolution.
Right.
Trace it all the way back to fire and such.
Yeah. So anyway, last thing I just want to say. Here's the other thing they want to do. Not only do they want to quit feeding people, but another big shift towards planetary sustainability is the decline in fertility rates nearly everywhere in the world. As long as women's choices continue to be supported, global population will soon stabilizing, reducing the need to feed, house, and sustain even more people.
So they want to cut down on people?
Yeah, that's exactly what they want to do. I mean, more than one person has said that.
Hey, I know what'll save the planet if we just blow up the planet.
Yeah, right.
Then there'll be no need to save it.
We can wait for the Vogons to come through their space highway.
That's right. That's right. All right, I got a couple of quick little updates.
Okay.
It appears that all attempts at censorship and suppression these days are just going to backfire.
Really?
Alex Jones, as we know, encountered some trouble last week.
Right.
And since then, he's been on about every talk show that I have watched. He must have. I gotta believe that his popularity is increased due to this. Similarly, the people who tried to smash Trump's star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame found that some clever people came up with a nice little temporary
sticker.
That's it.
Temporary vinyl sticker. It looked exactly like it.
Brilliant copy.
And they put them all over the place.
Right. So now which one are you going to smash up? And it's just like, it's just crazy. Now they have to see those things all over the place. All those people. So good job there. Way to go.
Well, as I say, Bill Cosby and Kevin Spacey haven't lost theirs.
Yeah, look. Bill Cosby is literally one of my top 5 favorite comedians all time.
Yeah.
I mean, he was so funny, it was beyond words. And so it's tragic beyond words. We're in a situation now, but I wouldn't kill his star off of there. The two don't mix. You don't need to know anything about his crazy antics to enjoy his comedy.
Right.
So
I agree.
All right. Another thing real quick. I noticed that New York City just voted to cap Uber and Lyft.
Yes. How are they going to do that?
They are preventing new people from, I guess, I don't know how they're going to do it. I don't know how exactly.
All you have to do with Uber is the only thing you have to do is to fill out
download the app
online and get the app, and you're done.
I don't know. Maybe they've got some registration system or something.
You don't register.
Yeah.
I mean, it's on your phone.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see what the enforcement is like. But they're doing it, of course, at the behest of the limousine and cab people.
Well, duh.
Yeah, exactly. Because they have a monopoly at this point, and they want to maintain that monopoly.
Right.
Interestingly, the L train is closing for 16 months or something. And they're anticipating a huge traffic problem in New York City for the next year. And so this coincides and overlaps perfectly with their suspension of the market forces in play to alleviate the traffic, which is, of course, Uber and Lyft.
Right.
So, good going once again.
Way to go, yeah.
We'll see how that goes.
What's interesting to me, you brought up one little point, and that is, and I've talked about this before, people talk about, Google and Apple and these YouTube and so forth being monopolies.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I've always maintained that in a free market, you can never have a monopoly.
Right.
The only monopoly is the one that uses guns, and that's the government.
I'm with you there. I was listening to Jimmy Dore
Oh yeah.
on the Joe Rogan podcast.
Yeah.
And Jimmy always has these great observations. Came up, but then he comes up with these bizarre solutions that are totally counterintuitive. He talks about the monopoly status of he believes they are monopolies.
Yeah. Okay.
But then in the same sentence, literally the same sentence, he says, if you come up with a competing company, they just buy you out. I mean, the implication there being, you can come up with a competing company.
Right.
In other words, and you don't have to sell out to them if you don't want to.
Right.
And we've seen this. Facebook bought Snapchat or whatever.
Oh yeah.
The other Instagram.
Well, and eBay bought PayPal.
Right.
I mean,
so,
and they could have bought PayPal for $50 and ended up in $5 billion when they finally made it or whatever.
Well, it's it just goes to show you, there like you said, there is no natural monopoly. Facebook obviously did it.
There are always alternatives. This is the thing that people don't realize. There are always alternatives,
especially in the tech world.
Well, not only that, in almost anything, because if we're just gonna, they might be slightly less efficient, but we still have telephones. We still have I don't know what do you call it, the see me thing on FaceTime.
Mm-hmm.
We've got there's all kinds Periscope.
Mm-hmm.
There's all kinds of things that you always, they may not be as efficient, but until something else comes along, as I say, those people, Facebook displaced MySpace.
Right. Exactly. And Jimmy Dore comes around. He points out that he says there's a group in the government, sort of a star chamber type of cabal of former intelligence executives like Michael Chertoff and Henry Kissinger.
Yeah.
And these people, I'm not kidding, have advised Facebook in terms of these suspensions of Jones and such. And Jimmy's solution is, that he wants the companies regulated so that they can't. I know, regulated so that they can't.
I'm rolling my eyes here, folks. I can't see this.
They've gone all the way around, I can tell you. And I'm thinking to myself, who does he think would be on the regulating committee?
Right.
But those guys.
Right.
Those are the guys.
Well,
that would be.
Who regulates the regulators?
Well, exactly. And
that's the beauty. People don't understand. The market regulates everybody, whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
And mostly it's whether you, even if you don't like it.
Right.
But the market will do it, and people that claim that there's a market failure, no, there's no such thing as a market failure.
You haven't got it yet.
You haven't got it yet. And then what you're going to do is you're going to call up somebody with a regulatory effort, which means there's a gun involved, to regulate this thing out. And I've always said, who will protect us? One of my favorite movies was Missouri Breaks. Who will protect us from the protectors?
Mm-hmm.
This was
one of my favorite movies, The Watchmen. Who's watching The Watchmen?
Right. I mean, this is exactly. And this is so. These guys, as I say, unfortunately, they've got guns, and people seem to forget this. But in a free market society, people don't have guns, and it all works itself out. You just have to give it a little while.
Yeah.
It might be uncomfortable for a few weeks, but it'll all work out.
A little faith. All right, that's all I got.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. Yeah, we've blown off an hour here.
Woohoo! Thanks for tuning in.
Yeah.
We appreciate it. We will have video back very soon, I believe, by the next show. So,
which, by the way, will be what?
Wednesday. 4 o'clock.
Okay, Wednesday at 4 o'clock.
That's right. So send us any comments, questions, everything. You can tell we've obviously been shadow blocked because of the paltry number of views that we have. It's obviously a government cabal against us. So
deep state.
That's a
deep state. A couple of times it's interesting. We said things on this show, and like the next day or two, almost word for word, it comes out on another. So somebody's listening to us.
That's right. Well, thanks a lot.
Thank you. Yeah.
We'll see you soon.
Or at least you'll maybe see us.
Yeah.